So here we are, second king of the 20th dynasty, probably Egypt's last great king, Ramesses III. He chose for his throne name Usa Ra. So he copied his former namesake, Ramesses II of the 19th dynasty, by taking the throne name Usa Ra. And what does that actually mean? It means the truth and justice of Ra. His name, Ramesses, was meant born of Ra. So it has a close affiliation with Ra. And of course, Ra and Amun are fused together as Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. So another title was Merry Amun, beloved of Amun. So he's got the whole thing there. He's got truth, justice, Amun, Ra, all fused together in his namesake. Dates are difficult. There's lots of controversial ideas about when he reigned. I'm just going to throw a couple of dates at you, but I follow dynasties. He will always be the second king of the 20th dynasty, so it's much easier to remember that than these dates, which can change with new data. As new data is found in Egypt, it can change things. So we're looking at 1186 BCE to 1155 BCE. Now he ruled Egypt for 31 years. He did have a 32nd regnal reign, and we'll talk about that later. He had lots of problems with a changing Mediterranean world and the threats everywhere. Year 5, invading Libyan tribesmen. Wow, invading. They're not incursions, they're not attacks. These are people trying to move into Egypt and settle. So it's year 5 with the Libyan tribesmen. Then in year 8, there's a confederation of sea peoples again, on land and sea this time, coming down the coast of Syria, past Byblos into Canaan and onwards to Egypt by land and sea. He sent his army out to Gaza to deal with the land force, and he managed to trap the ships that the sea peoples were on in the estuaries of Lower Egypt and burn them and stab them to death with long spears. That's what he tells us in his commentaries. So that's year 8. Then at year 11, the Libyans are back. This time it's still an invasion. They're trying to invade Egypt. They're trying to settle. So what's going on? These aren't attacks for booty. These aren't grabs for slaves or livestock. These are invasions. And people don't usually move anywhere geographically unless there is a lack of food, there is warfare, or there's dramatic climate change. So let's have a look at this dramatic climate change. It could have been a third eruption on Iceland, Hekla 3. That could have sent a cloud ash into the sky that separated or settled on Britain, Europe and parts of the Mediterranean. Well, if that ash cloud, that acid ash cloud settled on crops, could kill those crops. And it's very fragile in the ancient world. If you lose a crop, it's the difference between eating during the winter months and starving. So that could have been a motivator as to why people were on the move. Ramesses III has a successful reign, but in his 32nd reign, there was a plot to murder him. The conspiracy was led by a secondary wife called T, and her son was Pepek-Ka-Amen, and he was a royal prince. His older brother would later become Ramesses IV. Second year, Ramesses III was due to celebrate a Hebsed, and it was going to be focused in Thebes during the Feast of the Valley. So we know that that month was July. That's when the bark of Amun-Ra left Karnak. It crossed over onto the west bank of Waset, and it visited all the mortuary temples in there, and that had been established since sort of 11th and 12th dynasty. So it would have been a great festival in Waset probably for a month or so. So if you can imagine a whole capital city getting drunk and partying for a whole month, and it's all going to be provided by the king and the temples. Anyway, the conspirators were caught and there were trials. 12 judges were appointed to try the guilty. That's a way of describing the accused. They're all guilty. So there were 3 trials of 38 people. 28 were executed. Now, it wasn't a simple execution that you can imagine, getting, arrows or anything like that. The executions were impaling. So that was pushing a stake through your back so it comes out of your chest and mounting the pole up into the ground, or hanging you from a cliff with a rope. So if you died in those 2 manners, it wasn't just your physical body that died, it destroyed your spirit inside your body. And the Egyptians believed if you died in those 2 ways, then your spirit couldn't go to the afterlife, so that you would have the first death, the physical death, and the second death, which was your spiritual death. The other 10 were allowed to commit suicide. So those would have been the guys, that would have been the prince, his mother, and all those high officials who actually did the act. So those were the guys who would have been allowed to commit suicide, and they would have been probably taking poison of some sort. Now, during the interviews of the queens and the princesses, the conspirators, 2 of the judges were corrupted by them, but there were 4th and 5th trials of those accused of taking part in this corruption. 2 of the judges had their nose and ears cut off, and 2 others who were also named. The Queen T and her son committed suicide. So remember that the ancient world is a very visual world. So if you saw someone coming down the road and they didn't have a nose or an ear, you knew that that was a person not to be trusted. So any physical deformity of any kind was a signal that you've been punished by the government in some way. And these were people to stay away from. King dies, a lingering death, slowly bleeding to death. What a shame. Great ruler who defended Egypt on 3 separate occasions. The economy was changing. Because we think there were failed crops, wheat and barley became expensive. Inflation starts to creep in. And the future rulers of this 20th dynasty had lots of problems. So the successor was the king's 5th son, who became Ramesses IV, a Hekwan Matra. And we'll look at him real soon. Okay. I hope you've enjoyed the content. Take care of yourself. Bye for now.